Okay, so I'm Rosie Oliver, and I'm recording an interview today on the 12th of August at Deptford Town Hall, and I'm speaking to Ian Elmslie. Ian, can you spell your name, please?
Elmslie.
Perfect, and it's I-A-N.
I know, there's only so many vowels in it.
Yes.
I-A-N.
I-N, brilliant, okay. And the purpose of this interview is for the avant-gardening Bijou Stories project, Where To Now the Sequins Have Gone, which documents the gay bars and communities that existed in the borough of Lewisham, particularly in the 70s, 80s and 90s. And it will give rise to creative projects that include a podcast which may feature some of the material from this interview. But the interview is also for the wider umbrella programme In Living Memory, A People's History of Post-War Lewisham, and an oral archive that's being developed for that. So that's the preamble. Let's start. Ian, just in a word or two, could you just introduce yourself?
My name is Ian Elmslie. I'm a recently turned 60-year-old performer, author, former teacher, prison liaison officer. Anything where they'll open a door and have me chat, I think I'll go into.
Okay, and we're interviewing you because you were part of an act. Tell me about that act.
I was in 1990 under the orders of one Lily Savage. I united with a old drama school pal called Katrina, and we formed an act called Katrina the Boy, thinking, Savage has said he'll get us a couple of gigs. We'll just see what happens, maybe do one or two. And it became a 10-year career where we took 1 week off a year, and we would just work it throughout the whole of the 90s. We just worked and worked and worked in every single gay bar that was and maybe will ever be, but it was an extraordinary time, a very, very special time to be working on the gay cabaret circuit. Okay,
so before we get into your experience in the borough of Lewisham, tell me a little bit, give me a flavour of the act. What was it about? Who was who? What were you doing?
Well, we were, in retrospect, because I had no knowledge of the gay cabaret circuit at the time. Savage spoke about, I'll get you gigs on the gay cabaret circuit. This meant nothing to me at all. And it's only when I started working on it and going to places like the Royal Vauxhall Tavern and the Black Cap and the Royal Oak and the Two Brewers for the first time in my life. I'd never been in as a punter, the first time I'd ever gone in as a performer. And I realised after a few months how unusual we were as an act, because at the time it was all drag queens, most of them lip syncing to other people's songs, and the occasional stripper thrown in. So to have a loud-mouthed blonde woman singing live and being very funny, and a gay man sitting at a piano not taking his clothes off, was at the time really quite revolutionary. And so the first time we ever played venues, when we walked on stage, you could see people just going, what is this? What are they going to do? And then we gave it to them. Whether they wanted to have it in their lives or not, we gave it to them. And we had, and I think the fact that it was the right time for something new and different and funny and quirky and live. We were completely live, which was a big challenge to some of the venue sound systems.
So what sort of songs was Katrina was singing, right?
Katrina was singing.
Tell me a bit more about the act. Give me a sort of feel for it.
There was nothing we would not do. There was no style of music we would not invade and take as our own. Yes, you can have the typical 60s girl singers, a lot of Dusty, a bit of Sandy, a bit of Mama Cass, blah, 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 blah. But then we would do Cole Porter and Rodgers and Hart and Noel Coward. We'd do glam rock. Sometimes we would finish our set with, Devilgate Drive by Suzi Quatro. I think the night we finished with Born to Run by Bruce Springsteen, you just saw the audience's jaws just go, what? Musical theatre we looked at, we did some original songs. There was nothing, Disney nights we used to do, country and western nights. There was nothing we would not have a bash at, if it worked with a piano, because all we had was a piano with a built-in drum machine. And so the song had to have strong lyrics, strong melody. It couldn't rely on arrangement. So we spent a lot of time listening to a lot of songs to find out ones that made us laugh and were topical. We tried to find songs that were possibly going to reflect what was happening in the world at the time.
Can you give me an example of a song that you might have sung that had a resonance?
Okay. I mean, when Fergie was caught having her toes sucked by someone on holiday, we found the song "Popsicle Toes," and so you just try to find songs that Katrina had, a fair old gob on her, and it helped if she could set up the songs in a funny way, and if they were topical. Our first song that we ever did at the RBT, our opening gambit, was Cruella de Vil, which of course we dedicated to Margaret Thatcher, with a Phantom of the Opera intro to let them know that this is what we thought about her. So it would make political jibes and jests and just observations of what was going on. If we could find a song that was timely, taking the theme tune of the old TV show Rawhide, but doing it as if the Pet Shop Boys were doing it. So you take this like rollin', rollin', rollin' country and western song and marry it with a very 80s disco treatment and making the audience laugh just with the fact that we'd taken an old song and slammed it up to date. That was a lot of fun to do.
What can you paint a visual picture
of the two of us? Now I will have to pinch a line here from the legendary Victor Lewis Smith, who used to write for the Evening Standard. He used to do the television criticism in the Evening Standard, and it was kind of law that if you hadn't been slated by Victor Lewis Smith, you really weren't anybody, because he was caustic. And he once referred to Katrina. He'd seen us on the telly doing a dreadful game show, and we acknowledged that it was an awful, awful game show, the new Mr. and Mrs. I shudder in the memory. We had to film 52 episodes in 2 weeks. It was just, we got paid. But he described her as looking like Gaza in drag, which I thought was hysterical. She did have like very cropped, peroxide blonde hair flipped up at the front with a Tintin quiff. And when we first started working, she was a big woman, she's 16 stone and proud of it. And with a mouth on her. She was kind of sort of Dawn French, met Alison Moyet, met Joe Brown. That's what we're talking, in your face, took no prisoners. Whereas I was, sat very quietly behind the keyboard. And my stage outfit over the years very quickly morphed into me just wearing a vest and jeans on stage. Not for any sort of predatory reasons that I was trying to seduce the audience, but actually because the venues were so hot that, I could just go, and I don't like things around my arms when I play the piano. So a vest and jeans, and I didn't have to carry a wardrobe bag either. Less things to carry, I had quite enough to carry. So it served our purposes that, this very loud, colourful, ebullient woman was out front making people laugh, and I was slightly removed and quite silent at the back of the stage, which occasionally makes you quite intriguing, especially to a gay audience. And call it, because I was the boy, some people didn't even know my name, so that again gave me a certain mystery.
Wow. 52 episodes in 2 weeks. That sounds insane, but that's
by the end of the day, believe me, you had 5 episodes that you didn't care if they knew anything about each other or not. This used to walk on, you just go, oh, nasty blouse. We didn't say that, you just thought it.
Okay, so moving on to Lewisham. What brought you to Lewisham?
I moved to this area in 1984 when I was a drama student. I was a drama student in Sidcup, and you just searched for digs that were along the train line that took you into Sidcup. I always felt very sorry for people who went to St John's. They must have stood on the platform and just watched trains going by, because it was like, this train does not stop at St John's. Poor drama students. But I moved to Lee in 1985, after sort of 1 year in Chislehurst. I sort of like became resident in Lee in 1985 in a shared flat, and that's when I staked my claim on Lewisham for many years.
And was that before or after Katrina and the boy?
That was before.
Okay.
I mean, I met Katrina at Rose Bruford's, and so we were friends then, but that was a good 5 years before we started working together.
Okay, so before we jump into Katrina and the boy performing at the local pubs, you know, did you know the local pubs here?
I didn't, and it just, again, it became a voyage of discovery, because you tend to think that you have to go into London if you want to go to a gay bar, which at the time, you know, being a student, you know, money was tight, and so if you could get into anywhere free, you went for it. So I was tempted to go into London to the Hippodrome on a Monday and Heaven on a Tuesday, because I could get free tickets. And as a result, I didn't know about the Lewisham scene until the 90s, till we started working on it. Until I went to the Albany Empire in Deptford, and people would talk about the castle in Lewisham in a way that didn't make me particularly want to go and visit it, I have to say. And that was all I knew of gay bars in Lewisham, certainly in the late 80s. That's all I knew.
So you didn't know them as a punter, but you did know them as a performer. That's how you got to know them.
Yeah, that was the first time I ever saw these places, was when I walked in with my gear to set up, and you just went, oh, okay, flock wallpaper, marvellous.
Okay, so tell me, which one had a flock? I mean, tell me, where would you, which venue can we start with?
Well, I had to start with where my heart lay and lies, which is the Queen's Arms. I'd known the Governor, Joe Thompson, from the Gloucester in Greenwich. That's when we first met. And he was very famous because he'd won the pools. And that was quite glamorous. Because you often hear about people winning the pools, but you never actually meet anybody who does. But Joe won the pools. And I think he used part of his winnings. I think he bought hairdressers in London called Bona Ribe. I think he just invested in places. And I think had enough to eventually lay his feet down in the Queen's Arms. And I loved the Queen's Arms. It must have been the smallest gay bar in the world. It was like being in somebody's living room. You know, this sort of central bar with this sort of horseshoe bar going on around it. The music was not blasting out, because what's the point? It's tiny. So it became a lovely place to go and chat with people. It was a very chatty bar, a very family bar. And they did, you know, quiz nights going on there. Fiercely competitive at times, really competitive, which is always good to see. And of course, we performed there. And when you played in the Queen's Arms, you didn't feel like you were going into battle, which some venues could be. Nobody was exploring ecstasy at that time in the Queen's Arms. It wasn't that type of place. And nobody was actually out on the pool. There they'd come for a quiet, not a quiet night out, but a safe, gentle, chatty, hopefully fun night out. But it wasn't necessarily going to end up in them going home with somebody. So your audience for the cabaret was very attentive. And when an audience is attentive, you can play everything from your catalogue, because they're with you, they're enjoying it. And if you're singing a song that they don't know, it's 3 minutes of their life. They're not going to like go boo and run screaming out the building or screaming at you. So it was such a joy to play there. And the bar staff were just an absolute joy, because they knew everyone. And everyone had their particular places where they used to sit and stand. I sat by the bar, by the flap, there, and they knew that I would have a pint and a half of Guinness when I came in, because I was driving to go there. And that, to me, is the mark of a great bar, when the staff know the customers by name and their bevy. There was never any trouble there, ever. I didn't even see a raised voice in that bar, apart if they were joining in with the songs.
Yes, yes.
And I think it did have flock wallpaper. But it was just, you felt like you were in your granny's front room, but there was something very comforting about that. It was clean and jolly and so welcoming.
Yeah, and it's someone we spoke to last week was saying it was just this real mix of people. Is that?
Oh yeah, all ages. I mean, it's one of my sorrows, my observations of the scene now, that it tends to be there's the Bears bar, or there's the Twinkie bar, or there's the this bar, and everyone feels the need that they have to go and be with their group of people and only them. But I love a venue that's mixed, completely mixed, ages, sizes, looks, genders, straight, gay, whatever. Bring them in. That's how we learn about people, and that's, I think, how we can change people.
Do you have any memorable performances in the Queen's Arms? Was that Arms or Head? Arms.
The Queen's Arms. I could hear Josie Thompson. Oh, welcome to the Queen's Arms. He had this incredible voice, like Peggy Mount. He just was really down in his gut, and sometimes his introductions to the act would sometimes last about half the length of time that the act was going to be on, because he liked to big up the Queen's Arms, and say what a welcoming bar it was, and how we have top cabaret here, and you're sitting there, can we go on now, please? But bizarrely enough, my most memorable night of doing cabaret at the Queen's Arms was with a singer called Jamie Watson. Katrina was, towards the end of our time together, was doing quite a lot of TV. She was doing a programme for UK Living called The Sex Files, which was taking a lot of her time. We were individuals, we allowed ourselves and each other to do things outside the act. It would be stupid to say, no, you can't do that. And so I started doing the occasional gig with a male singer called Jamie Watson. And we did a jazz set together, but a predominantly jazz set together. And I remember my boyfriend at the time hearing us rehearsing and saying, who's going to want to listen to this? These old songs. He said, and I think he was worried that it was just going to die its arse. But we did it for the first time at the Queen's Arms. And to see people standing there and really listening to an old song by Rodgers and Hart, He Was Too Good to Me, or mixed into a Bacharach and David song, A House Is Not a Home. So you're presenting this medley of what it's like when a relationship comes to an end. And people were openly weeping because they were in the venue, which was sympathetic to cabaret and was an integral part of the evening. People just think, oh, I'm going to just listen to this song that I don't know. And once you listen to words written by Lorenz Hart and Hal David, you've got this ain't chirpy, chirpy, cheap, cheap. These are great lyrical songs that tell our story. And the fact that Jamie was singing, He Was Too Good to Me. It was a gay man, like myself, in trousers, singing specifically about being a gay man. And that's quite rare, even now, for a male singer to sing he. Even Elton John was singing she, for heaven's knows. And it took George Michael a while to specifically sing he. So I've always think it makes such a difference, especially to young people in an audience, to hear someone singing he. And I remember the response at the end of the evening, and my boyfriend was there at the same time, and I was really pleased that he was like really stunned at the response, because it was genuine, it was warm, and it was an appreciation of music. It hadn't been a particularly funny evening, because they were used to Katrina and I being quite funny, but it was, listen to these songs are great songs, and they tell our stories. So that it was a big tick in my memory book. I remember that evening with real pride, as I do with the work I did with Katrina, very much so. I received a compliment the other day from a governor of a venue that we used to play at in the 90s, and he said, your act was so innovative. And that to me is a real compliment, the fact that we never did other people's songs, we were always searching for something new and something challenging. And the audience responded to it, which was a big relief.
It being in the Queen's Arms, a very sort of receptive, attentive, sympathetic audience, and you weren't fighting with them. I wonder if that's a segue to the castle, maybe.
Yeah, believe me, we never did cabaret in the castle. I don't think they ever did cabaret in the castle. The castle was just... I went in there once with a friend, and it was just bizarre because you had to walk through... some venues had a gay night. The castle had a gay bit. And so you had to walk through the front part of the bar, which was the straight section, and we're talking Catford here, to get to the gay section at the back. So anybody walking through the front bar was going to the back bar. It wasn't going there for any other reason apart from the fact that that was the gay section. So to run this gamut of eyes, the one time when I was not shouted at, we were not shouted at when I went in there. I just aware that we were being looked at. It was like walking through like a haunted house with the pictures and the frames, like the eyes just move as you're walking through. But we weren't disturbing their game of pool. I think we stayed for one drink. If you asked me to describe it, I really could, apart from just thinking I think it was a bit spit and sawdust. Just a plain bar. Why the manager decided that it was going to be somehow financially beneficial to him to have a gay back bar, who's to know? But I'm sure some people have had a jolly time there. I'm not quite sure I did. I didn't feel the need to return.
No, and you never got the piano out, and no.
I never offered my services to entertain the troops, which is actually quite unlike me, because I used to play at a straight wine bar in Lee Green called Casablanca every Friday night, and got adopted, by the pump. And believe me, they were electricians, plumbers, interesting crowd. But I became, and I use the words with care, the pet puff. If anybody came in, a stranger, and because I was making Boy George look plain at the time, and with sequin gloves, the hair was God knows what. I looked like I just dived headfirst into the Max Factor counter at Boots. Everything was going on. But if anyone gave me grief, you would just see these people rise up and stand in front of them and say, no, he may be a puff, but he's our puff, which I really liked. But whether that would have happened in the castle, I don't know. But it did in Lee Green.
And what was the name of that act?
I was just on my own.
It was just Ian.
Just Ian the puff.
Ian the puff.
But it goes back to that at that time, in the mid-'80s we're talking. And in retrospect, maybe that did take guts. I didn't feel like I was doing anything particularly brave at all. Maybe in retrospect, I was really putting myself on the line there, but I really didn't care. And as long as I entertained them, they didn't mind. They didn't mind at all. So, and I spoke to the governor only the other day, and actually got the chance to say thank you very much at a time when we weren't particularly welcome in venues for various reasons. That you invited me to play in your bar, you made me part of the family, and you protected me on the very rare occasion if anyone gave me a mouthful. So kudos to him.
That's fascinating. What about the Roebuck? Did you ever perform there?
The Roebuck I did go to a few times, and that was, again, you just had to steel yourself a little bit when you went into the Roebuck, because everything that Queen's Arms wasn't, the Roebuck was. Queen's Arms very cosy, very friendly, very gentle. The Roebuck, you always felt that something was about to happen and it wasn't going to be necessarily pretty. It just had this slight tension going on there. Not between the fellas, I have to admit. It tended to be between the women, and that's not being misogynistic. It just had that vibe that if anything was going to kick off, it would usually be accompanied by a pool cue, and words would be said, and they'd be above an alto key. I never witnessed a full-on brawl. I just heard enough to know that that's what occurred. And the couple of times I went there, I just felt, this isn't really my place. Not really my place. I'm sure that there were some people there, it was their idea of absolute paradise. Yeah. But for me, get me back to the Queen's Arms, please.
So, but you did perform there?
We didn't perform at the Roebuck. I don't think that even they did cabaret. I think it was in the vicinity. It was only in Lewisham, so it was only the Queen's Arms that did cabaret. And whether that was a financial decision because they've got to pay the act. Whether they thought the punters wouldn't go for it, I don't know. And when Stonewall came along, we'd parted professional company by that point, and I know they had a pounding disco that went on in the Stonewall bar, but I don't think even they did cabaret. In the late 90s, it was this weird curve, and I saw it coming when the drugs really started to come into the clubs, and cabarets started to become almost an interruption in the evening, because people wanted the boom, 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 because their pill was kicking in. And so someone coming on and singing a Dusty Springfield song or saying, here's a lovely bit of Noel Coward, really, not quite what they wanted. And certain breweries brought in policies that did not make it easy for acts to perform in pubs. Yeah,
that's so interesting. That sort of dance, drugs, all of that kind of killed cabaret on the gay scene.
I saw it happening. It was just bizarre, and I found myself having to dumb down the act, and I choose that phrase with care. You think you're playing this place on a Friday night. They're not going to go for the Sondheim number. They're not going to go for anything that's too wordy. And so we ended up doing, and we used to call it singy-songy songs. If they can join in and sing along, as long as we're still enjoying what we're doing, but don't get obscure.
Yeah.
You just keep it up, keep it bright, keep it gay.
Yeah.
Because you know that they're going to not hold their attention.
But thinking back to, for example, being at the Queen's Arms.
Sorry.
Being at the Queen's Arms. Yeah, it was fun, right? I mean, let's both have a slurp.
Just unnecessary crack.
For the record, it's one of the hottest days of the year, of the millennium.
And going to get worse.
Could you give me a ditty, Ian? Maybe like something, give me a taste of the act, or maybe like of the Queen's Arms, just a line or two.
Oh,
just to
gosh.
Give a little.
For example, country and western. You can't go wrong with country and western. I mean, the titles are just so great. What was my favourite country songs? I'll be getting over you when the grass is growing over me. It's brilliant. And I knew I'd hit rock bottom when I woke up on top of you. I mean, it's just superb. And there's something so funny about country and western, which someone described as 3 chords and a tragedy. But we used to do this Patsy Cline song called Tra-la-la-la-la-la Ting Triangle. And so we bought a triangle, and Katrina had, but she did have to say to the audience, no, this is quite a quiet instrument. So when I hit the triangle, you will shout ting. So for a start, we get them bobbing up and down because it's country, so they got to bob up and down, and then they're shouting ting. Then they got to slap their thigh and pretend spitting on the floor. So in one song, you've got a lot of audience participation going on over a silly little country song that nobody knows, called Tra-la-la-la-la Triangle. We added an extra verse at the end for sort of gay measure to really make the triangle really multi-gender identity. That was quite fun to do.
Do you remember the words for that verse?
Oh gosh, no. No, I'm ashamed to say I can't. It's been so long ago. And there's one song that we used to do, which I'm particularly proud of. Lloyd Webber had just brought out Sunset Boulevard. I'm not really a fan of Andrew Lloyd Webber, and I wasn't a fan of that show. And one night I just started to do a rewrite of one of the songs from Sunset Boulevard. Let's continue the story. So it went from that into Three Little Maids from School by Gilbert O'Sullivan, about these 3 actresses, all of whom played Norma Desmond. Then we went into Petula Clark took over, so we took Downtown and added new lyrics to that bit. And then we finished off with Take That Look Off Your Face, but changed the words to Take That Show Off the Stage. So you just played around the lyrics. It was a big old song to do. You got 4 movements in that song to get through. And Gilbert Sullivan, quite complicated to play, especially when it's a patter song. It was three. Again, I forgot the words. It's been so long ago. But it told the story of this show my views on it, these three actresses fighting about it, Petula Clark coming in, and then just a commentary about Angela Lloyd Webber said, I must be mistaken. I'm sure. Must be mistaken. But haven't I just heard that song before? I'm sure it was sung at the end of Act 1. Andrew Lloyd Webber, I know your score. Take that show off the stage. I can see through your style. That's about as much I can remember at the moment. But, plucking up the courage to do that song in certain venues, especially for the first time, because you thought, are you going to get it? Are we going to get it right? Yeah. And the first time we did it, sounds a cliche, the roof just blew off because nobody had heard anything like it, and it was clever and it was funny. So I'm proud of the rewrites that we did. But sometimes what you really enjoyed seeing people do was just sing along with a song that maybe they hadn't heard for a while. It's Getting Better by Mama Cass is a great song, and it was a great opener, and it was such a positive opener. And as an observation from the 90s, with everything that was going on in that decade that had been kind of birthed in the 80s but just exploded in the late 80s and 90s, I think every cabaret act realised that they were responsible for being the tonic for the troops, that we could actually walk into a bar and go, yeah, I know there is all this crap and shit happening outside that is awful, but just for 3 hours we're going to stand inside a bar and we're going to have a bit of sing and a bit of a drink and a bit of a dance, and then we can go out and face it again. But I think we all acknowledged at that time, keep it up. We weren't going to sing tragic songs at the time. So to see an audience at that time sing along with What's New Pussycat, or our favourite, because I'm a lifelong Donny Osmond fan. Donny Osmond changed my life. And when we used to encore with Puppy Love, and you would sing the first line, and they called it Puppy Love, and then you couldn't hear the rest of the song because the whole audience was screaming. And seeing these great burly men going, ah, and reaching their arms out to the stage as if they were Osmond fans was hysterical. Hysterical. And that's my joy of remembering, of having that ability to reach inside somebody's nostalgia bucket and pull out a pearl and go, you haven't heard this one for a while, have you? And now you are free to scream as much as you like. Then go out and face the shit in the outside world.
Ian, what you said I just loved, and then someone sort of put their, I don't know what it was, Hoover or something. And of course everyone can hear the words perfectly clearly, but I just would you mind awfully just making that point again about, you were saying about the context being the 80s, and perhaps just to clarify for people who don't know about the politics of the 80s and what was going on and how it was a kind of a refuge to boost morale and that kind of thing.
Gotcha.
Would you mind awfully?
Of course not. I mean, during the 80s and being right at the forefront of, we started the 80s with such hope. There were groups like Bronski Beat and Culture Club, and I mean, even it was a few years since Tom Robinson, who was such a hero of mine. But it just seemed like there was this change and people become more accepting, and a lot of street people had now gay friends and they were embracing us. And then, whoom, in comes, and let's quote those damn papers, the gay plague. And all that fear rose up again. And Thatcher and Clause Section 28 was just driving us back and back and back. And all that progress that we had made just seemed to be being whipped away from us, which is why the pubs and clubs became so important, because they became, this is our space, this is our home, and we need each other at the moment. That overused phrase, gay community, I really started to feel it, that we realised that nobody was going to fight our corner for us. We had to stand together and shout together. And I was really lucky at the age that I was, that Tom Robinson Band taught me that, I could be gay and angry, that I didn't have to have this victim label on my forehead. I was allowed to be angry and shout about what was happening. So going on the Section 28 marches and fighting, when they dared not to give us an equal age of consent, they compromised and gave us 18. And I remember an unusual ally, Edwina Curry, at a protest meeting in Trafalgar Square, saying that as a woman, if someone told me I could have some but not all equal rights, they'd walk away bleeding. And I thought, good on you, girl, good on you. But then in the 90s, when I started working in a scene that I didn't really know about, but that we were so embraced by so warmly, and you felt the responsibility at that time to provide people with a distraction, a release, a relief from all those headlines, all the funerals, all the grief that we were going through at the time. So just for a few hours, we could stand in a pub with a drink, having a laugh, having a sing-along, having a bit of a dance, and it was like topping up your battery. It's like, right, I can go out and take another week of Daily Mailisms and stupid, ignorant statements because we've been topped up. I've had my battery topped up. I am not alone. And that's all we need to learn in life. And it's such a journey for every gay person that we go through. And every gay person still goes through it now. People say, oh, it's so much easier now. But as a former secondary school teacher for 15 years, and the number of students who came out to me, I was an out gay teacher, who are they going to come out to me? But seeing them do that walk across my classroom, and I know what they've come to say, but they have got to say it. They've got to have that elevator coming up from their gut, which feels like you're being sick, and to say those three words. But at that time, we all need to feel that we are part of a community and that people have got their arms around us. And in the 90s, from my position on the stage, which was such a privilege to see, and seeing people supporting each other, and believe me, I saw people becoming more ill over, if we were playing at a venue, say once a month, you would see a deterioration in people. And it fills me up now, and then one week they wouldn't be there. But to see people standing with them and holding them and cuddling them, and for them, to come in the dressing room and say, oh, you really made me laugh tonight, I love that song, blah, 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 blah. And that might be the last time you ever saw them, but you know that you have done something at the time when we felt that people weren't helping us that much. We had to find that within our community. And that's why I will always support my local bar. I won't go into town, I'll go to my local bar. That's my tribe, that's my chair. This is the place that I want to say, this place has to stay open, because there is somebody down the road who is plucking up the courage to come in here for the first time. And they're probably standing outside the door now, looking at the door. And we've all done it. And if they hear laughter, or if they hear people singing along, chances are they're going to go in, because they think, I will be safe here. That whole Ewan Hansen that's going around at the moment, you will be found. Very clever thing to use as a hook for that musical. You will be found. Because there's a whole generation now of thinking, where do I belong? Where are my people? Where will I be found? And we find them.
Okay, so we're back in the room. The battery just ran out, and we're back in the room. And I was just explaining in how there's sort of two sides to this project. One is memories and reflections on that scene, which you've shared with me wonderfully. And the other is, the name of this project is Where To, Now the Sequins Have Gone. And I wondered, what you feel now about what's available.
Oh, that's an interesting one. I think we are possibly sitting in front of the biggest buffet in the world, and we don't know where to start. I actually showed a friend of mine the other night the number of flags that there now are and the number of titles for groups that there now are. And 3/4 of them, I don't know what they mean. I love the fact that I apparently am now labelled. I am a demisexual. Do you know what a demisexual is?
No, I'm intrigued. Tell me.
And there's even a flag. They've designed a flag. A demisexual is someone who can only have a sexual relationship with someone with whom they've already formed a strong emotional bond. So in other words, no cruising, no cottages, no sauna. That's never been my way, never will be. But I love the fact that somebody somewhere has come up with this label and designed a flag. Not asked me. I would have had Paisley all over it. But I worry that people are searching for an identity and there is almost too much choice. I had a brief sojourn as a school governor, and all-girls school, and they had a pride group within the school, which I thought, that's pretty impressive. And they invited the gay school governor to come and see one of their meetings. Of course I went along. And I sat next to this 12-year-old girl who was talking year 9. And I know year 9. As a teacher, I don't know. They hate everything. They hate themselves. They hate their parents. They hate school. They hate the world because they are a mess of hormones. And this girl was having an open argument, or an open heated debate with herself about whether she was lesbian, bisexual, polysexual, or asexual. And I couldn't help but think, you're 12. You're 12. And it's the only time I ever put my hand up in the meeting, because I was there to observe. And I put my hand up and they went, oh, Mr. Elmslie, yes. And I went, and I just looked at her and said, you will know when you fall in love with somebody. That's when you know who you are, because it's not about what you are. It's not about a label. You have fallen in love with someone, and that's when you will know. It might not last. It might be love that only lasts a year before you discover another part of yourself. But I worry that there is so much emphasis on who am I, what am I? And I think people are losing sight of who am I. I identify as Ian. I've identified as Ian since single figures. I knew I wasn't like other boys. From the earliest, I wanted to be a ballet dancer at the age of 8 when I should have wanted to be a fireman. I knew. Being an Osmond fan, you didn't say that on the playground. I did. I came out when I was 16 at a boys' public school in the mid-70s. That took some guts. But I've never felt the need to brand myself apart from this is who I am. If I choose to wear makeup, which I still do, does that make me gender fluid or non-binary? No, it makes me Ian on a Friday because I want to do it today. And I know it is necessary. I know it is that, and everyone is going to find their pathway to who they are. I just worry that it's an ever-increasing maze at the moment, that it could occasionally lead to a dead end when it sometimes simplify. Edit your life, as you said about writing a book, which I know, but everyone is on their journey, and whatever anyone has to do to get them to the person that they need to be, not want to be, that they need to be, that they have to be, do it. Do it, explore, experiment, call yourself that's how I see things at the moment. But then I think, am I just old?
Well, I think it is a big question that people of all generations are asking, aren't they? I think we're all reflecting on our pronouns and all of that. But I guess sort of slightly swerving back towards the bars, I guess one of the questions that we want to ask with this project is finding out about the role that those gay bars, like the Queen's Arms, had for people in a really tough period, particularly the 90s, as you said, the 80s, 90s. They're all shut. Most of them are closed down now. And what has that done to our sense of community, A, and B, what's the impact on us as individuals?
Like too much in society, it's pushed people towards their phones. You know, everyone is just now face down over a phone all the time, and often their lives are focused on their phones. And it makes me sad. And the one local gay bar that I do still go to, the George and Dragon, which I love the George and Dragon. I've known the governor 30 plus years, salt of the earth, still puts on cabaret. He's a great man. So much time for the Duchess. But there will be that time you see people on their phones, sometimes even when they're in company, and you think, turn it off. Look up. But the loss of the local gay bars, I think, is incredibly sad. Of going to a pub where it is your space and you do feel safe and you can have a drink and play pinball. I used to love playing pinball in the Gloucester in Greenwich. I loved it. Having a quiz, having those things that are not what I call the Kleenex syndrome, where you pick people out of a tissue box and blow your nose out and then throw them away. I think this whole making anyone, I loathe this disposable society that we're into, and it's not just things, it's people as well. It's like, oh, you'll do for the night. And that's harder to do if you're going to a pub and you're seeing the person that maybe you were a little bit offhand with the previous night, thinking, well, I'm never going to see them again because they were just on my phone. And actually, they're drinking over the other side of the bar from you, and they might be next Thursday and the night after that. So in a way, you almost have to modify your behaviour and get some social skills going on in there, and not treat people quite so... callous is the wrong word and cold is the wrong word, but actually take some time to get to know people. Go back to a bit of old dating, that beautiful flirtation that used to happen in bars, where someone catches your eye and you spend about 5 minutes pretending not to catch theirs and just looking at every part of the room apart from them. Then you think, right, I'll have a go, and hopefully that you'll get that quick eye contact back again, and then, no, I'm not looking. And then it might be a little bit longer, might be a little bit of a hint of a smile, maybe the raise of a glass even, and that's when you know you're in. And that beautiful dance of dating that happened in bars doesn't happen anymore. And that's such a shame, because you're just judging people by statistics. It's like the old Victoria Wood sketch about Hellman's mayonnaise. Now, are you happy with your wash? You feel like you're just filling in a checklist, and you get to that certain bit, go, oh, no, sorry. Oh, if you're 5'6", no, sorry. But that 5'6" might be the person that makes you happy for the rest of your life.
Quite.
It's quite bizarre.
Yeah.
And so I miss the very personal, when you're sharing the same air, sharing the same space as people. And the fact that the venues have gone one by one is really sad. And I worry that the young people who think that they might have to behave a certain way, that they might have to go into town and into Compton Street and go to GOY and have to wear a crop top and have to have a belly button ring. I've got to be like this because I look around and there are so many people here, and I've got to look like them, when in a smaller venue you didn't have to do that. It's much less pressured. So I worry. I worry.
And I wonder if there's a generation thing as well, because it's partly what's coming across to me is a slightly beleaguered older generation, feeling that our venues have gone, our pronouns are all in question.
Sometimes bad grammar.
Sometimes there are apostrophes in all the wrong places, plurals and singles. Where's my place now? Do you feel that?
I've always felt like an outsider, always. And even when I was really at the heart of the gay cabaret scene, I always felt like I was slightly outside of it. Because Katrina was the front woman, loud, blah, 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 and I was the piano player. And so people inevitably talk to her, maybe about me sometimes, which used to drive her up the creek. She said, I'm not his dating agency. But I've always felt that I was just slightly outside of things, and whether that might be choice. Maybe I've chosen that as well. I think sometimes I prefer looking and observing rather than being right at the heart of it. I'm going to plug now. It's why I called my book A Marvellous Party, because I felt that I'd been invited to this marvellous party where all my heroes, everyone that I'd looked up to and idolised since the year dot, were in the same room. And I got to meet them. But it wasn't about me. It's almost like I was standing at the edge of the party going, wow, aren't I lucky to be here? As opposed to the person swinging off the chandelier or dancing on the table. I've never wanted that. But as I age, I am quite content to still be an outsider. What I object to is being made to feel like an outsider by a community that I've battled really hard for. Because over lockdown, I had no excuse but to record an album of original songs. Loved it, called Old Boyfriends. Very specific songs about old boyfriends. A lot of them very funny, some of them a bit more poignant. Composed it, recorded it, released it, everything. Got some lovely gigs above the Stag Theatre Bar, which now is permanently closed. You know, our one LGBT specific theatre space in London has had to close its doors. But all these venues who say, we are all about inclusivity, we are all about celebrating diversity, not when you are 60, you write your own songs, you perform the piano and you do them in trousers. Not a hope in hell. No one will give me a gig. If I was doing it in a dress and singing all that jazz, like they all do, I'd get a gig. But it's just very interesting, whether it's ageism, whether it's the fact that I wear trousers, whether it's original material, I don't know. Not offered a gig, even with my history. And that's interesting when you are made to feel that you don't belong by your own community. That's tough. And I do like seeing theatre. I saw a play recently called Riot Act, Alexis Gregory. Verbatim theatre, 3 characters, one an original Stonewall Bar survivor, one drag queen, probably in his, like, say, 70s, 80s, and one an activist, and all giving their perspective of standing up and making a stand. And one of the characters just say, no, you young people, if you see an older person in a bar, go up and talk to them. Find out where you came from. Find out your history, because they did a lot of marching and a lot of shouting and a lot of demonstrating and put up with a lot to enable you to have the freedoms that you enjoy, which you probably still moan about and say you haven't got enough. But, you know, if you can walk through the streets of London in a miniskirt, a lot of people did a lot of work to do it. So go up and talk to them. Don't just leave us sitting in a corner thinking, oh, there's flies buzzing around their head.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that goes to the whole topic of that kind of intergenerational connection and conversation, and where can you have that?
And I don't know. And when bars and communal places go, you don't get that. I mean, it is interesting at the George, there is a real mixture of ages that go in there. And it's a very respectful bar, the George and Dragon. And that's all down to the governor. And the fact that cabaret still goes. And I think that cabaret, bizarre enough, is such an inclusive thing. You know, encouraging people. I think it was Joyce Grenfell, who I adore her. She said that when she used to sing in wounded troops hospitals when she was during the wartime. And she said that what people really want, you know, in times of trouble is to sing together quietly. You know, if they're lying in the bed, it's why We'll Meet Again is such a problem. So it's not vocally taxing, it's not roll out the barrel, it's this very gentle melody. And sometimes when I see the drag queens in bars singing a song that everybody knows, and see people singing along, it's such a beautiful thing. and more of it. But when these places disappear, that feeling of, oh, we're all singing together goes. And I'm singing next to somebody who doesn't know all the words, but I only know the chorus. Wow, you know more than I do. You're older than I do. How do you do? You know, have a chat. Have a chat. So important. So important. But we've got to sort of reach out hands to people. And vice versa. But again, I was so lucky in schools. I spent my day, I know some people think of it as purgatory, with teenagers, with all their stuff. And they could ask me any question that they liked. They had an out-gay teacher, they could ask me anything. I remember this one lad in year 9 asked me quite a personal question. I answered him. And he went, "You're not embarrassed at all, are you?" I went, "No, because I haven't been embarrassed since I was 10. I felt sorry for the people who weren't like me in a way, because I'm going to have way more fun than you." Thank you, David Bowie, who pointed out that screen and said, if you are an outsider, come and join my gang, because we are going to have so much fun. We're going to have so much fun. And thus we did. But yeah, I will always have this desire within me to let people gently know what they don't, and maybe they should. I love going into prisons and reading bits from my book, to a book club of prisoners in Thameside Prison. It's great. But you ask them about their heroes. Who's influenced you? Who would you like to have dinner with? Who do you look up to and think, wow, I'd really like to meet you? And then you read, and it's just one of the most rewarding things when you go into a space where a lot of people wouldn't go and think, oh no, they're going to get to me. They're going to be horrible to me. And they're not, because we all want to learn about people, and so we should. But in bars, in clubs, you got that opportunity. If you're standing next to somebody ordering a drink, you might spot off a conversation and, shock horror, make a new friend that lasts your life. And again, that's another legacy that will be lost by bars going. I worry about long-standing, life-enhancing friendships that were forged in bars. I bumped into my favourite barmaid from the Queen's Arms the other day. Sarah, she's with a girlfriend now. They've got a baby together. We will be buddies till the day we drop. But if it hadn't been for the Queen's Arms, I never would have met Sarah. Never. I never would have met her beautiful son. And, she shouts at me the other day, and she calls me, because we used to joke about having a baby together. I was sperm, she was womb. I'd walk, hello sperm, I womb. Baby was going to have fab hair. She's got these fabulous ringlets used to come down her forehead. But now she has got a baby. And so the other day, walking home to where I live, what I hear from the other side of the road, oi, sperm! I do hope someone growly overheard. I went, what? Where? But these friendships that were formed, and talk about the Queen's Arms, when Joe Thompson died, and it's darn near an anniversary that he passed away, and the turnout at his funeral filled the entire church in Hither Green, both floors of Hither Green, and standing only. And then there was a wake drink in the Rose and Crown in Greenwich, and this wonderful seeing people that you hadn't seen for decades, because once that bar closed, like any bar closes, people dissipate, because it was the one place that people used to come together. It's like when the Cheers bar closed, where did those people go? And then suddenly we're all in the same room again, and we're greyer and we're bigger, but you look in the eyes and the eyes do not change. The eyes never age. And to see these people again under such sad circumstances. But he pretty much individually created that beautiful space where people could meet and make friends for life. And that's the loss of, if bars disappear, where do people go? We lose our alternative living room.
Wonderful, sad point to end on, I think.
I think I should make a joke now. Tell an old Bette Midler filthy gag.
You mentioned, because I think for completeness, you did mention your book. So do you want to just say a few words about it? What it was? What's it called?
My publisher will never
Yes.
give it. I'd left teaching. I'd lost my brother under the worst circumstances. I was completely flatlined. I loved my job. And I didn't know what I was going to do next. And a week after I finished teaching, Cilla Black died. And I'd been with her 6 weeks previously at Paul O'Grady's 60th birthday party. And it was the second time I'd been in the presence of showbiz royalty. And so I just wrote this thing about what it was like playing the piano in front of Cilla Black, because she's seen everything. And you know, when you're looked at by Cilla Black, you know you were looked at. And people responded to it and they said, oh, that's really good. That made me laugh, made me cry, made me think. And I thought, I've met a lot of famous people. Let's just write, every Saturday, let's write a ticklish remembrance of meeting somebody famous. But I realised I was writing about my heroes. I was writing about meeting Donny Osmond, meeting David Bowie, meeting Quentin Crisp, Tom Robinson, Armistead Maupin, George Michael, Boy George. Yeah, no, it's bonkers. And all these people who, in my little outsider land, had just what I call thrown down the trail of breadcrumbs. You know, when you're lost, there's someone who says, okay, you're lost, come this way, I'll guide you out the woods. And so each chapter was, you know, the day I met Quentin Crisp, the day I met Boy George, the day I met Bo. And I only realised about 3/4 of the way through that I was writing a book. And also I was writing, you know, because the centrepiece is about the 90s and working on the gay cabaret circuit, and realising that I was writing a period of our history that could be lost if it wasn't written down. Because so many people who should have written their stories didn't. They died or just never found the time or the wherewithal. And so I wrote what I call a 320-page thank you letter to my community, to my heroes, called A Marvellous Party. And you know, it's about how, again, we can't get through this life on our own. We are not strong enough. We need people, whether they be friends, whether they be celebrities, to help us along the way. We can't do it by ourselves. And I'm and to have the opportunity to say to these people whose records I'd heard, whose books I read, you changed, saved my life. You gave me a clue how to survive public school, how to survive my parents' disapproval, how to become better at my job, how to become a better teacher, how to become a better communicator. You know, we are permanently in a classroom through life, I think. You know, we're reading, we're listening, we're seeing, looking at art that goes, wow, that's a life-altering thing. And I never intended to write a book, but I'm jolly pleased that I did. And my favourite of you, and I will finish with this line, from a fellow drag queen of the cabaret circuit, the wonderful Miss Millie Mop, who looked like 7 foot of Marge Simpson in Blonde Beehive. He said, "You've written down what the rest of us were too drunk and drug-fucked to remember." Which is the best review ever.
Excellent. Well, we can end on that.
We shall. I gabble away.
Wonderful. And I don't know if you had caught this on tape. I don't think you did, actually. We're talking about being drunk and drug-fucked. And you, as a performer, was seeing this sober.
Completely.
Yeah.
Yeah. We just didn't drink on stage. I just couldn't have done my job as well as I wanted to if I'd been remotely sozzled. So yeah, I was taking it all in. I've seen people at their best and their worst. But of course I don't remind them much.
Excellent. Well, Ian, you've been an absolute star.
I've loved every minute.
Well, I've loved every minute. Thank you. Really wonderful.
My
Thank
pleasure.
you so much. So unless you have anything else that you're burning to say.
Love each other. Just love each other. Please, please, please love each other.
Love each other. Get that. Goldsmith Archive. Okay, I'll press stop.